I now call to order the regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The first item on the notice to the public, the time, the date, the place, and the agenda for this meeting was published as a legal notice on February 28th, 2025 in the Aiken Standard. Notice to contiguous property owners were mailed. Public notice and signs were posted on the properties on or before February 28th, 2025. Notice of the meeting was sent by March 21st, 2025 for posting on the city webpage, and they were sent to the city clerk for posting on the municipal building notice board at least 24 hours before this meeting. Agenda sheets were mailed or emailed to interested parties. It is unlawful for any person giving testimony to this board knowingly providing false information. Now that's according to section 22-9 of the Aiken Municipal Code. Each infraction is a separate offense with a penalty up to 30 days in jail and or a fine of $1,092.50. To the board. The minutes for the January 28th, 2025 regular meeting is on your schedule for approval.
The January 28, 2025 regular meeting minutes of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I second.
Been properly moved and second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Those in agreement show up by a raise of the right hand. For show approval. I think there were 3 people absent. Yes. So the minutes for the January 28, 2025 meeting are now approved. I see you did not get rid of the election of officers. Election of officers.
Okay.
You postponed it to this meeting.
And we have, I'm gonna put you in charge of that. How about that?
Okay. Normally, we elect officers for the Board of Zoning Appeals at the first meeting, but it was delayed until this meeting. So at this time, we will now proceed with the election of the officers for the Board of Zoning Appeals. At this time, the position of chair is open. The board is open for nomination.
Mr. Chairman, I move that you continue to be the chairman of the committee.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that I continue to be chair. Do we have any other nominations?
All in favor?
Hearing none, all in favor, show by raising the right hand. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Congratulations. We
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thank you. The other person would be the secretary to the board, and it's usually a staff member. The chair would accept nomination for that person.
This is for the staff member.
Uh-huh.
I nominate Max Planky.
I second the motion.
Do we have any other nominations?
All in favor?
All in favor of the Max being the secretary, raise your right hand. Thanks, Max. I think that's all of the members that we have to vote on at this time.
Mr. Chair, I think we would like to nominate Judy Turner as the vice chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all
Sorry,
right.
Judy.
That's a motion for Judy Turner if she's willing to continue.
Certainly.
Do we have any other nominations for vice chair?
It's good to know that I'm in charge of the vice.
Right. Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion, show by raising the right hand.
I vote for myself.
Yes. The motion is carried unanimously. So Judy Turner is the vice chair. I think that concludes the nomination. Be mindful of the continuing education requirements for the board.
Now, does the city come up with things for us to do? I said, does the city come up with things for us to do to be whatever?
No.
We
not-
have to find our own?
Yes. Not that I know of.
I think Max, though, if I
Yeah,
may,
we typically
remember
will
last
organize it
time
for
you arrange all the continuing ed, do you
Yeah,
not?
typically. We haven't finalized anything at this time, but you'll be notified.
Okay, thank you.
We would we would take a look at the minutes of the January 28th, 2025 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes of that meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes from the meeting be approved.
I'll second that again.
It's been properly moved and second that the minutes of the January 28th meeting minutes be approved. Do we have any discussion?
No discussion?
I think we've done this, haven't we? I think we approved the minutes already?
Yep.
I don't think we did.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
I think we did.
Well, it's good for a second time then.
I mean, they were so good, I will certainly approve again. But,
Well, they were so good. Okay. Those in favor, raise the right hand.
Do it again.
The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move directly into new business. We have an application of variance requests from Paul and Rebecca Morgan to permit a reduced side yard setback, and that's that property is located at 301 New Lane Southwest, and that's Zone RS. Has this been properly posted?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it has.
Were there any inquiries that you wish to share with the board?
We did receive one phone call regarding more information about the request and one written comment. Unfortunately, that written comment was not received by the time of staff mail out for the applications agenda packet, but you should have copies of that written comment. Be there.
Thank you. Presentation.
Yes, sir. .301 New Lane Southwest is a 0.71 acre lot located south of South Boundary Avenue between Lawrence Street Southwest and Newberry Street Southwest. The property is zoned residential single-family stables, RSS, and developed as a detached single-family residence. The request is for a variance to City of Aiken zoning ordinance section 4.2.1 to permit an approximate 10-foot side yard setback for the construction of a new attached garage, parking pergola, and in-law suite on this portion of the property here. Pursuant to section 4.2.1 of the city zoning ordinance, the primary structure on lots zoned RSS must be set back from the side property line 25 feet. The existing structure is between approximately 30 to 40 feet from the southern property line. Go back actually one here. You kind of can see it's a little bit at an angle here, so it's not parallel with the side property line. So it does vary a little bit. But based on that measurement, it is considered conforming along that property line. Similarly, based on the location of the primary structure on the property, compliance with the zoning ordinance would require that the proposed addition come no closer than 25 feet from the side property line, thus requiring a variance. Information about the site plan dimensions of the addition is contained in Exhibit B of your agenda packet. This was submitted by the applicant. A little difficult to read. There's markings on here, but essentially this is the addition. You have the covered parking, garage, parking pergola, and then additional living area, all sort of meeting a 10-foot minimum build line as proposed by the applicant. As depicted on the zoning map attached is Exhibit C, adjacent parcels are zoned RSS and primarily developed as single-family residential dwelling units. There is one vacant lot to the south here, however, and Aiken County Museum is to the north, but it's primarily residential use. Some variation does exist regarding development of the single-family residential neighborhood. Most development in the immediate area generally consists of late 19th century to early 20th century century era single-family construction on lots wider than they are deep. You can see there's some of these are quite wide here. Several lots in the area do meet the minimum 3-acre standard for the RSS district, but there are other examples of smaller legal non-conforming lots given the age of the neighborhood. Primarily as you move southward, you tend to find some of the smaller lots, with the exception of kind of these two here, but most of the immediate area are around or upwards of 3 acres. Exhibit D contains photos of the property depicting existing conditions taken by staff. This is just a picture of our notice. This is on the New Lane side. This is the picture of the home there, kind of front profile. This is the side yard where the proposed addition would go. I don't believe it's marked out at this time, but essentially it would kind of go in this area here as part of the request.
And where is the property line on the left?
It's not immediately clear, but I assume it's probably somewhere around this fence line here.
Oh, okay.
That's typically where they are. I don't believe there are any survey markings at this time. This is the opposite side there, just kind of indicating the sort of space on this side. This would be considered a front yard, and that that portion of the structure would need to be set back 50 feet from the property line because it does adjoin two roadways. It's a corner lot, so it's considered to have two front yards. The planning staff's evaluation of the request, as well as the applicant's response to the required 6 variance criteria, can be found starting at page 2 of your agenda packet. And this concludes staff's presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm more interested right now in the setback of the neighboring garage to the property line. Do you know how far that is?
You're referring to this structure here?
Yes.
Yeah, I did look up the building permit that was issued for that. It appears as though it's approximately 10 feet.
10 feet.
Yeah, which would be conforming for detached structures.
And in parentheses, it's marked variances. Were they granted a variance to get that?
Not to my knowledge. Now that the applicant may be able to correct that, but just in looking at the building permit file, it appears that they were requesting a 10-foot setback for the building permit, which would be conforming to accessory structure standards.
All right. Thank you.
But
Max, and now, help me understand, the adjacent garage is within compliance on the setback, is that right?
That appears to be the case. I found the record where they went to the design review board for that. It was not mentioned that they were granted any variance at that time in that application. So, again, typically detached accessory structures are required to be 10 foot off the side property line, and the building permit that was submitted indicated that it was 10 feet off.
Okay, so that's a detached building.
Correct.
In this case, the applicant is, for this variance request, it's all attached to the
Correct.
house. And so thus, the side setback has to be 25 feet.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Question,
Go ahead.
yeah, question for the city. Max, do we know the approximate setbacks as the plan has been submitted to the side between the pergola and what would be, I guess, the rear of the in-law suite? Do we know what their 10 feet, I guess, would be the closest point? I guess that's the pergola corner, or is
You're
that the?
in reference to, yeah, I mean, it's a little hard to see here, but yeah, it looks like per these sketches here, this is a 10-foot building line that they're showing, and that's as close as it's going to get. Again, it's sort of at a diagonal because the home isn't
Yeah.
parallel with exactly parallel with the property line here, but yeah, I mean, essentially, both the I guess
Both corners
southern
in are
corner.
approximately 10 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
that's it.
Is the fence that is in between those two properties, is it on the line? Because it looks like that garage is very close to that fence.
Yeah, it's hard to tell for us without basically having the property surveyed. So it's possible it's not. It's possible it is. It really just kind of depends on when it was built, etc. So again, the property owners may be able to comment a little bit more clearly on that, but without us having survey markers, put down by a survey, we can't 100% verify where the property line is relative to existing structures or fences.
Karen?
Sorry, my mic was not on. Is it correct to say that when it's detached or freestanding, in relation to your question about the garage, if the design was different, where the buildings were connected by a breezeway, is any connection to the main structure constituting freestanding or attached?
I believe if it's connected by a roof line, it's considered attached regardless of if it's enclosed or it's a breezeway. I think that's primarily comes from building code. I don't know 100%. But if there's a chance of fire spreading like on a roof line, I think that's why there's that separation in setback requirements. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that would be my guess of why there's that distinction there. But yeah, I mean, if it's attached by a roof, regardless if it's enclosed, it still would be considered attached to the primary.
Because they're looking at the roof line
believe so.
connectivity. Okay.
In the same way that we consider structures that maybe just like have poles, like a carport, that's still considered a structure regardless if it's enclosed or not. So it still has to meet setback standards.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question
Go
for
ahead,
the
John.
city.
John?
Do you know exactly the justification or the reason for the 25-foot side yard setback in an RSS zone as compared to just a regular residential zone, which is 10 foot?
Yeah, I don't know the reason for that. Again, the only thing I could guess is that typically they're larger lots. The minimum standard is, for example, a new lot to be created 3 acres. So presumably because there's going to be more space on the parcel, that standard was increased. They also do permit horses by right, so that might have something to do with it. I'm not sure, but I don't know why that one. I mean, it's basically double, our standard kind of single-family residential standard of 10 feet, or almost triple.
Thank you.
The entrance,
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
the entrance for the golf cart, those doors just open to the backyard?
I'm not sure. The applicant may be able to clarify that. But yeah, it appears that not all of it is going to be completely enclosed. I think this will be sort of more of an open air parking structure. This will be sort of enclosed, covered parking, and then there's going to be a additional living space, an in-law kind of suite in the back, which will be heated and cooled, so part of the primary residence. But yeah, I think this portion here will be sort of open.
One other quick question, Max, with regard to the 25-foot setback, it's for RSS, residential stables, but would this be true in the historic district? Is this in historic overlay?
Yes, it is, yeah. So it would be subject to design review approval, likely. I'm not sure exactly if it would qualify given its age. I think it was built in the 80s, at least according to county records. So it may not be a contributing property, but likely it would require some approval, from design review as far as what it's going to look like.
Okay, well, that being said, the adjacent garage, that says garage variance on the adjacent piece of property, that's a historic piece of property. So would it have come to this board at all at any time, since design review can approve these buildings? As we learned a couple of meetings ago, they can not necessarily, the request wouldn't have to necessarily come to us. It would go to design review to approve that location for that garage. Is that,
Well,
maybe I misunderstood what we
not
learned.
necessarily the location. I was able to find the, so I'll just go back in reference to this kind of structure here. I was able to find attached to the building permit, the design review board application that was submitted when they submitted this for construction. But it looks as though the building permit indicated it was to be 10 feet off the setback, off the property line, which would make it conforming, which would mean they would only need to pull a building permit and get design review approval. So they wouldn't need to come to the Board of Zoning Appeals. At least that wasn't referenced. There was no reference to that in the application. And they indicated on their site plan that it was a 10-foot separation.
Okay. No reference, what you're telling me is there was no reference to that garage coming to this board?
Correct.
Okay.
Any further questions to the city? Hearing none. Thank you. Thanks, Mac. The applicant, would you read yourself into the minutes, please?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here and to present this proposal. I'm Rebecca Morgan. My husband, Paul Morgan, and I have our address at 301 New Lane Southwest, which we've been discussing. It was also a pleasure to prepare that package and answer your questions. They were tough questions. They really made us think about this property and what it meant to us and what it means to Aiken, to be part of the community. And I think I would want to share just 3 quick things, and then, of course, answer whatever questions I can. I really do appreciate the analysis in response to our questions from the city. We retained Mr. Holland in order to really thoroughly optimize how we could make this unique piece of property our own. Foremost, second fact, we are happy that our neighbors are here, and we were after a design that was compact and really preserved and enhanced not just the property, but our privacy, our mutual privacy. It's important living in a city. I'm from Maryland. Our family currently lives on a farm, and we don't worry about quite this closeness. Not the same. So privacy was important, and then there is a special family consideration. Our own family, we have a large extended family. We have family here in Aiken, and responsibilities for my own elderly relatives, and so that led us to this particular this design, to be able to have the workspace of a garage, to be able to have an in-law suite to accommodate our extended family, and then to try, as you look at the design, to keep things compact and to be able to make the property work with minimal disturbance. The nice open space in the back, and trying to make sure that our neighbor's home, in particular their residence, was protected from any additional building. And there's a good fence between us. There's actually 3 fences now, so we may be able to get to the bottom of the question about where's the actual property. So I will stand by to answer your questions.
Question from the board to Ms. Morgan.
Mr. Chairman, I had a
Go
question.
ahead, Karen.
I'm curious about, it says the status of the property is non-owner occupied. So are you currently living in the home, or?
We are transitioning. My husband has a business that's moving here into South Carolina. Our family stays there regularly. My daughter lives in Charleston. And we are transitioning from, as I retire from federal service in Maryland, to this as a retirement retreat. So when we purchased the property, we rented it right away. Houses don't fare well when people don't live there. And that tenant has since moved on, and it's been about a year now, been in the process of moving into the home and really getting to know the home, so we knew what we wanted in any changes or improvements. The home does need improvements, built in '83. We wanted to bring a whole proposal to make the necessary improvements, but also the enhancements that we're presenting and for which we need the variance.
Understood. So the intention is for your personal use. It isn't to
Yes.
upgrade it to then have it as a leasable property for investment.
No, this would be
Personal.
this is our personal family home.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I got a question.
But
Yeah, Mr. Morgan, how many bedrooms is the house as it currently situates itself now?
As you're looking at the plat, on the right side, that portion of the carriage house, There are 2 bedrooms. It's a unique design. It's an English cottage design. So each bedroom has a mini ensuite, a bathroom. So that's on the right side, and those are proper bedrooms. In the, off the kitchen, on the left side, there is a very, very small bedroom, sitting room area right off the kitchen. So I think that would qualify as 3 bedrooms in the home.
Okay. In your plans to create some additional space and housing ability for relatives or whatever, did you ever consider the other side of your property that's got all the room maybe? Or even the rear of the home that has all the room?
Yes, we did. In fact, Mr. Holland has done 2 designs for us. Our first thought, not having lived in the home, was to go into that back corner where you see the 3 trees there. And in that back wooded corner, also there's a very large hedge there. Our thought was, well, let's tuck in the same basic footprint, a small sitting room and a bedroom, and connect again with decks like we're doing here. So we thought, put it in that corner. And what we realized living in the home, spending time there, is when you walk into the house, it looks from the outside like a small carriage house, but the whole back of the house opens into this yard. So it's a large open green space, and that's really what our neighbors view, I think, see as well. So the part near the woods matches the woods. We did not like that design in the end because we realized we would be looking from our back. It's very private back there, and we didn't want to be looking at another structure. We wanted the green space. And that's what led us to think, well, let's move the structure where the rest of the structure is. That corner is also very interesting, and of course that's within the 50-foot setback. It's closest to the woods. It would be against our neighbor's vacant lot, but there's a concrete retaining wall that looks old around the property. So the idea was tuck it in the corner, maybe have a separate entrance from Lawrence Street. But visually it became less desirable, maybe a little obtrusive, of being able to have the open backyard. I'm a master gardener. We like outdoor space, and we thought to protect that and to protect the sight line into that space for the neighbor. Did I answer your question?
I think so. Well, that takes care of maybe the rear scenario. Is that kind of what you were
That's right.
describing? It sort of sounds like you're preserving your sight lines and your enjoyment of the property, potentially at the sacrifice of your neighbors, by putting it on the other side?
That's an important consideration, and I believe that had we gone with that first option, our neighbors, I'm going to represent what I see from the fence line, but they're here that's why it's a hearing. You can see that I believe that's their pool in that U shape. And if you look straight across, it appears to me that they have a view of that same green space. Now, there's of course a fence there and a taller wall in front of the pool. But over the lower fence portions, they would see into the open space. Had we gone in the back corner, we would not only have intruded into that 50-foot setback, but they would be looking at yet another structure.
Okay, so I'm getting all that. So just flopping sides of the house. I know you got a different layout, and I guess the bedrooms are on the right side, but it seems like what you're proposing there off the right side of the house extending back, you're not really interfering with that back corner of the lot at all, much less sight lines coming from your primary residence.
For the back portion, the back third of that lot, the sight line should not change. There should be no disturbance. And between, on the left, what was attractive about that design was that that wall of the existing house, for this as it's presented, has a kitchen window and a door at the front. So concentrating any new building against the external utility building of our neighbor and that open side yard space. Your main entrance is facing Newberry Street, I believe. I mean, it's a hard choice, but it seems that this would keep any new structure concentrated with existing structure.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, and again, without seeing the plans exactly and the layout of the house, which I'm not privileged to, just seems like it's always incumbent upon the homeowner to exhaust all conforming
Yes.
options to add niceties like in-law suites and stuff like that. Not necessarily what, gee, I kind of like it over here, so let me just get a
Right.
variance and stick it over here.
So we did explore this option in that back corner. We did consider if you were gonna intrude, we did not ask Mr. Holland to do a plan, but my mind, following your line of reasoning, went to that front, right? Because apparently there seems to be a lot of space. Why not put this over there next to, as I described earlier, the two primary bedrooms? And it didn't, in my mind, homeowner again, make a lot of sense to put a garage next to the master bedroom, and then interrupt all that flow into the backyard from the side. So maybe there was a third option, but we rejected that. My husband and I did, rather than ask for a design, because it broke the 50-foot rule. It was on the side of the woods, which we wanted to have more as a natural look, and it didn't make sense to park cars next to the master bedroom.
Okay. Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you.
But
I looked at the property this afternoon, at least just walked in on the left side of the property, and I saw the fence that apparently belongs to the adjacent property owner. The
Yes.
tall fence, like been there a while. Then I saw a section of a chain link fence,
Yes.
and then I saw the fence that had just one top rail and wire around it, which I think was existing, was
Yes.
it not, when you bought the house?
Yes, sir.
So I'm trying to get an idea of the 10 feet, and I did some pacing back, trying to estimate without pulling a tape. Did the chain link fence kind of mark 10 feet from the big line? Since there were no stakes, nothing showing where the corners would be or anything like that on your proposed addition. Your existing fence that is a complete fence, that appears to be more than 10 feet from the proposed, or from the alleged property line. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It's a bit of it's a discovery. I assumed, so you were able to see, and we discovered this chain link fence when we took there was a very old and large hedge
Yeah.
along that property line. And we elected to take it out. It was largely overgrown wisteria.
Right.
It may have been home to an armadillo, but I think we've ruled that out. And we were looking to clarify the site picture. We assumed that the existing fence was on or near the property line, given the relationship of the garage and the fence line. And the wire fence with the top board, I believe, was a pet enclosure, dog fence, backyard. And it clearly respected the boundaries of the overgrown wisteria hedge. It looks like it was a fence of convenience. Most people do that. We all have,
Right.
you just put it in rather than take the hedge down. So I don't know, I did not either put a tape on it to see if that chain link fence, but because it's a partial 3-section of chain link fence, you wonder, why is that there? Maybe it is the correct demarcation of the property line. I don't know how you'd tell.
Yeah, without a survey, it would be difficult to.
I understand, without an actual
Have
survey.
no idea.
Corners,
Surprised.
pins and so forth, I understand that. I'm just trying to get an idea in my mind, because I knew the former owner of the property, and you're
Now
right, that other fence was to
I did put
enclose
a
a
tape.
dog.
as best I could. They're hard to read, these measurements.
I
did
guess
put
I
tapes.
don't understand a fence of convenience. I don't understand that term.
Offense of convenience?
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize for being confusing. That wire fence with the top board looks to me like a very typical fence that a pet owner, a dog owner in particular, would put in to protect their pets and to keep them safe. And what I meant by convenience, sir, was very often you wouldn't go take in the overgrown hedge and do a survey and find the property line. You would fence pretty quickly because you wanted to protect your pets and worry about the hedge later. So it was easy to put fences in. I'm flabbergasted that there's 3 sections of chain link fence that were left with both ends dangling, that was in the hedge. It looked to me like a fence that was put in just to accommodate pets or a safe backyard maybe for toddlers. And that's what I meant by convenience, sir.
Morgan, do you have horses, or do you plan to have horses? This is zoned a stable, it's a horse district.
Yes, sir. So I do have horses now. I do not have horses in Aiken. I have horses at home on our horse farm in Maryland, our daughter rode. In fact, my daughter's pony is now at my sister-in-law's home. This is not a horse property
It isn't?
per se. It's 3/4 of an acre. And when you ask me the question, why would there be a 25-foot setback in 3 acres? I wouldn't want a barn closer than 25 feet to my house to respect my neighbors. So yes, we do have horses.
You're not gonna put any horses there?
No, sir.
Do any of your neighbors have horses?
Not on, but you don't have horses on this property, do you?
On their properties?
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have further questions from the board to the applicant? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Others to speak to the zoning, the variance request? Others to speak to the variance request? Read yourself into the minutes, sir.
My name is Chris Lawler.
What was your last name?
Lawler, Lawler.
Thank you.
I'm the owner of 443 Lawrence Street Southwest, which is the property immediately there. Right across Lawrence Street from the subject property. First, I want to say I appreciate very much the Morgans having neighbors such as the Morgans who are willing to make an investment and improve the property and bring it up to a higher level of that's probably a little bit more consistent with the neighborhood. I very much appreciate that. Having said that, I object to the request for the zoning variance on the basis that I think it does not meet the requirements as defined by the city of Aiken for a variance. And just to elaborate on that a little bit, one of the requirements to be granted a zoning variance is that the property, the zoning law as it currently stands would prohibit or unreasonably restrict utilization of the property. Well, I don't think that's a true statement in this case. I think the property's clearly been utilized for many years. There's room to add additions and do various things with the property, so I don't think it meets the requirement for that the zoning law is necessarily prohibiting or making unreasonable restrictions on utilization of the property. And part of the reason I say that is I've had the benefit, thanks to the Morgan's plans, of seeing what they wanted to do with the property. And I actually see, in my opinion, I mean, everybody has a different view of how these things are done, but in my opinion, I think that they can get the expansion that they're looking for without seeking a variance, or perhaps seeking a different kind of variance than the one that they're asking for. My objection is partially driven by the fact that they're asking for their house to go within 10 feet of their neighbor's house in a neighborhood that's got very spread out properties. And this is already not a very spread out property, I'll admit, but that's certainly making it far closer. The neighboring property is already fairly close, the neighboring house, and they would be within 10 feet of that property. And I see alternatives for building this in-law suite and the housing for the cars in such a way that it doesn't need to be that close. It doesn't need to be so much impinging upon the neighbor's privacy, etc. So I think that's really most of what I wanted to say. I agree with some of the comments from Brendan that there's possibilities on the other side of the property which still would require a variance because it's a 50-foot restriction. But if that 50-foot restriction were to be relaxed, there would be a lot of room there for a structure without even going into the backyard necessarily the way Mrs. Morgan was describing. And it wouldn't be right on top of the Hensies' house, which is the house to the left here. So anyway, I don't, if my first input is I don't see an absolute necessity for a variance to accomplish their goals, and I don't see it that it meets the requirements as defined by the city. My second thought is I think there's possibilities that could be made to work here.
Any questions from the board to Mr. Lowe?
So, one quick question. Let me understand. Your address is on Lawrence Street, so you're the adjacent property owner.
Yeah.
Going south, or you are across the street?
Going west.
You're going west. Oh,
Yeah.
so-
If you show the front picture of the house again, yeah, if you're looking at the house, we're on New Lane. That's and to the right over here is Lawrence Street.
Right.
I'm on the other side of Lawrence.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Immediately on the other side of Lawrence Street from this property.
Okay. I'll pull the old Aiken trick. You're in the old Goodyear place?
It is the old Goodyear place, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have others to speak to the variance request?
My name is Nancy Hensey, and my husband and I reside at 467 Newberry Street Southwest, and we are the adjacent property. I thank Mr. Lawler for stating all of the same considerations that have led us to oppose this variance. I would add to that from our perspective, our privacy is impinged with a new structure as it's being proposed. If it moved to the other side, we would certainly not have any problem with it. I would also recall that when we redid and are still in the process of redoing a very small outbuilding at the southern end of our property, we were required by the zoning board to move it back 10 feet. It was an existing structure. It had been in place for quite a long time. But our neighbor, Mrs. Young, objected, and so we had to move it back off its original site in order to comply, and we've done that. Any questions?
Any question from the board to Ms. Henson?
Excuse me?
I'm asking the board if they have any additional questions to you.
How long ago was the move, did you move that structure on the south side of your property?
We got all our permits May a year ago. It had to go both to zoning and design review.
But it was an existing structure?
Yes.
It seems like that would be legally non-conforming,
Well-
yes? Max?
We were very surprised that we had to move it, but we didn't fight it. We accepted.
Yeah, I can clarify. I believe the applicant, or excuse me, the Henseys had applied for administrative waiver to the setback requirements because they were removing the structure and rebuilding it. That constitutes basically a removal. If it exceeds 50% of the structure being taken down or removed, the new structure has to comply with current standards. So it's my understanding that it was in the setbacks because it was a replacement construction rather than repair. It was required to be 10 foot off the setback, and
All right.
indeed the neighbor was opposed to that. And we cannot administratively approve if there's a neighbor concern. It would have to come
I
before.
was just curious. It's not an issue here, but I was just curious about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, I have one
Oh,
more
we have one
question.
more question.
You have a garage 10 foot from the property line,
Correct.
and you're against your neighbors putting structures 10 feet from their property line.
Well, Our-
It doesn't seem
our
right or
garage
fair.
has a back without any windows.
I'm sorry?
There are no windows on the back of our garage. What
Okay.
faces their property is a blank wall. What we will be looking at is a place where people are living, where there'll be lights and activity. And it's very close to our fence, and we use that part of our house.
Okay, I was just, so the main structure is that one at the top left of the diagram, yes? And that appears to be 15 feet from the fence.
We saw nothing of the property until the old hedge was removed.
Okay,
Now we have a very clear view of the house, and we would prefer not to be looking at more structures and at lights.
I appreciate that, but I was just wondering, you had structures 10 feet and just,
Yeah,
Wondering
there
your
was no
position on it.
variance required when we built our garage. And I believe that the fence, our white wooden fence, is not the property line. I believe it is the chain link fence. If you follow the chain link fence to the far corner, our pool equipment is within it. It goes all the way down, and then it goes along the south end of the property as well.
thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have others to speak to the variance request?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Barbara Morgan. I am the sister-in-law to Rebecca Morgan. I live at 341 Dupree Place, and we do have a stable and we keep their pony. There's no indication, no one ever wants to put horses on that size of property. It wouldn't make sense. Regretfully, I've lived here a long time now, and this property is a non-contributing property, designated non-contributing in the middle of two historic places, Uncle Tom's Cabin and the Goodyear Place, which I apologize, I don't know the actual name of it, but the zoning, Rebecca and I had an interesting conversation of trying to figure out why the house is at an angle. You know, New Lane's square, everything's square, and we weren't here when the British couple that built it in the 80s, but we think it's because the setbacks back then were 50, they still are 50 feet. And if you look at it, it had to turn, the size of that building had to kind of turn to keep it, you see? They had to move it just a little to move it off to keep the corners within that 50 feet from the front and from the side. Just for your information, the side on Lawrence is really unusual. It has a retaining wall, like a cinder block, I'll never get the terms right, but a wall that makes that a very difficult egress on Lawrence Street. There are steps on the corner of Lawrence and New. That is the mystery, but there are, if you drive, they've cleared some of the shrubs, and there are cement steps actually at the corner of New and Lawrence, at the corner of their property. We've asked people, because we're going like, whose was this? There was the Hitchcock property was all this area, but I didn't see it until they got the property. I went, what in the world are concrete steps doing on the corner? So there's some interest trying to make sure they honor the integrity of this place. It is a non-contributing, trying to, a variance for 50, it didn't make sense for egress on that Lawrence Street side, given it's up. Their water main is up, I mean, and it was not kept up well. There was a lot of shrubs and wisteria that was taken down to determine what was what. In fact, on the picture, the aerial, Max, that you can see almost the shrubbery that was what I call vines and between the house. Nobody's trying to open up a view for their neighbors that wouldn't be done. And I'm sure they would be building, or not building, putting appropriate shrubbery to stop any sharing of view, to respect neighbors. That's what I want to make sure. A lot of this came about because they took down to determine what fence was what and where the property line and what it would look like to stake. And I have said to everybody, since I know most of them, if there's a problem with the line, let's figure it out now before any problems occur, because that's the right thing to do. But the garage on Newberry, you all might remember, I don't know who's been here that long, but the Uncle Tom's Cabin, there was a clay tennis court that for years they wouldn't let anybody build on. Do y'all remember that? Mm-hmm. Yes, Nancy, yeah. They would not, back in the day, that was considered historic, and there was no allowing of any building on the clay tennis court that was considered historic. That's part I remember from way back. The detached garage is right on that 10-foot. It's a pretty hefty building, by the way. I mean, it's tall, and their plan is consistent with the 10 feet. It would not even go to the front corner or the closest corner to New Lane of their housing structure. And if you saw the fence, they have a higher than, I want to say an 8 or a 10-foot fence where their pool is. And I'm confident there will be efforts made to return it to some privacy for both sides of the properties, for both properties. I don't know if there's any other questions, but I wanted to put it in context for you, if at all possible. And am I hearing it right that if it wasn't attached, they could do it like the garage? Is that what you're saying? That's what I was trying to. Because that was, to me, I was going, what?
So it would trigger additional standards. namely, it wouldn't be able to exceed the height of the primary
Right,
structure.
obviously,
There would
which,
be a 50% threshold, so it couldn't be any larger than 50% of the
Exactly.
heated floor area. But it is required to meet minimum setback standards, and yeah, for detached structures, that is 10 feet from the side. It would still need to meet front yard setbacks, though, unless, well, actually, technically, yes, that's correct. I'm sorry, but they can be in the front yard.
They can be in-
garages. They would still need to meet those setbacks.
okay,
But the living quarters would have to be could not be detached and in the front.
in the front yard.
Correct. Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure, because I was confused when we were talking, if it is not attached, it's not a problem, unless of the front.
Yeah. I mean, again, it would still have to meet those standards of the accessory buildings. Now, if they're going to put living quarters in it, that would also trigger accessory dwelling unit standards. So it kind of just depends.
Okay,
But yeah, if hypothetically it were just a detached garage, it would only be required to be 10 feet off the side property line.
okay. And an ADU potentially more.
Potentially, I'd have to double check on that. But yeah, once I believe that the primary concern is living space relative to setbacks, and I think that comes more from building code, where our standard comes from,
Okay.
where you'll see typically those increase. But
And if those are questions that need to be answered, instead of making a decision tonight, if you make a decision against it, is that a prohibiting for it to be reapplied? That's what I was, because,
Well, not if there would be a change of plans, you wouldn't,
yeah,
you could,
okay, that's what and I appreciate it. I didn't know, that's what
yeah. If there was a reworking of the site plan,
okay,
they could reapply it, yeah, at any time.
okay. Thank you.
Does the board have any question for Ms. Morgan? Thank you. Do we have others to speak to the variance request? Final call, others to speak to the variance request. Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion so we can enter a period of discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I
Karen?
would like to make a motion to deny the variance to section 4.2.1 of the zoning ordinance to permit an approximate 10-foot side yard building setback along the southeastern side of property zoned residential single-family stable, RSS, and generally located at 301 New Lane Southwest, TPN 105-12-18-001. The location and design of the structure addition be consistent with the submitted site plan, and that the final order shall run with the land and be recorded at the Aiken County ROD office.
second that.
It's been properly moved in second. Motion to deny. Do we have any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Karen?
I just want to make a couple of comments. I love everything about the proposed design, and how it's going to add to the functionality of the building. But unfortunately for the applicant, at this time, this particular proposal, I couldn't find a way to meet the criteria. We have to meet all six. And though I tried to make that happen, and there were some great cases made for how the building would be brought into the environment in a very thoughtful way. The bottom line was I couldn't make it meet all six criteria. And I do think that, as some of the other board members and some of the other community members have spoken to, there seem to be other options. My question in regards to whether it was detached, if that was going to create some other options and possibly alleviate the need for the variance. I still think that there's some wood to chop, figuratively and literally, as far as plans. And I feel like there's a very capable and beautiful architectural team on this, that I think that they could come up with something that would still tick the boxes and utilize the property without having to ask for the variance. Oh, and can I add just one more thing? This is my PSA. I really wish that there was a current survey so that some of these questions that they have about fence lines and staircases and relativity, full disclosure, I'm a real estate broker, love a survey, love to support our surveyors, but it really does help with a lot of the questions that you have, and it alleviates some of the encroachment issues that can happen when you're planning. So
Bud, did you have?
Yeah, just, I agree with Ms. Daly, as far as meeting the 6 criteria. You must meet the 6 criteria. The other thing is, yes, there's an old survey attached, in our, packet, but that refers to some old street names, and it sure helps us when we're out looking at property to realize that, okay, here are the corners of the property, and then going forward, if you come back to this board with another plan, it helps to at least putting small stakes out to say, okay, this is where the building's going to go, or here's where the exterior walls are going to be, and it just helps out to visualize what you're doing, and not just with a set of plans, but seeing it on the ground is really helpful. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Bud?
Yeah, just the second and third, my fellow board members, Daly and Coward, it's just not up to muster on all 6 criteria. Sympathetic to wanting to improve the property and make it more livable for in-laws and such. More wood to chop. I kind of like that one. And agree with the fact that there's a little different way to peel this onion and still get what you want. So we are encumbered with trying to grant variances for true hardship versus kind of nice to have sort of things. And it's just, in applying the 6 criteria, was just no way to contort that into those. So I will be supporting the motion.
Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion show by raise of the right hand. The motion is carried unanimously. The variance request is denied.
Move for adjournment, Mr. Chair. I'll move for adjournment.
Second.
second.
That concludes our meeting.